All right, yo, people, episode 4 of the AFC Wembley podcast. Another special guest in the building. It's unfortunate for my generation still because speaking from a personal perspective, I don't have, for various reasons, much older man, especially from the area that we come from, that I can say that I respect or look up to. And that's for various reasons still. But the guest that we have today is somebody that I do respect and have respected for a very, very long time. I have the pleasure of coaching his son and seeing his son grow and develop, not only as a player, but also as a young man. But I also have the pleasure of seeing how he supports his son in so many ways that for a lot of people will be deemed out of the norm. He's an entrepreneur. He's a community leader. He's a specialist in how fathers should conduct themselves. I have the pleasure of presenting you guys David Mullings. King.
Loads of pressure there.
Bro.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
I try to give you the flowers.
Thank
bro.
you.
What go on, King?
I'm good, man. It's a pleasure to be here, bro.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm honoured.
How's life been for you over 2020 and that? How's life been for you recently?
It's been crazy because obviously the world's changed as we knew it just over a year ago now. But I think I've become I'm not an introvert.
Yeah.
My wife's definitely an introvert, I think, and I think I'm taking on some of her tendencies. So what I would say is, apart from the devastation that COVID is, obviously the effect it's had on people, that aside, as you go.
I hear you.
Just been really busy, really. Actually, in the work that I do, I've actually been more busy. And COVID has just opened doors for me that I didn't see before.
Yeah.
So essentially, I've been very busy. The year's flown. It's been a year since we've had any form of normality, and the time's just flown by. So I'm just giving thanks for health, strength, and for the loved ones around me to be safe and well as well.
I hear you. The conversation we're gonna have today is it's a difficult one for me personally, but it's an important one. It's a difficult one because we're talking about fatherhood and the impact that fathers should have and the implications surrounding fatherhood in our community. And difficult one for me for obvious reasons. But I think it's so important for us to have this conversation for fathers who may be struggling in whatever situation they're in, but also for kids who might be looking for a father figure and just don't have any. But before we get to that stuff, I want to start with you. It's ironic because I've had the pleasure of getting to know your younger brothers before knowing you. So shout outs to Michael and Joseph. And then over the past 10 years, we've built our relationship. But I know that you've come from a strong family unit. But I just want to know a little bit more about your upbringing. You've grown up in an era that's before me, but after my parents. So it's that midway. So what was life growing up like for you?
So obviously, you know a bit more than maybe the listening public. So to put that into perspective, I grew up in a 2-parent family home, Kensal Green. Big up my KGB crew.
Large up.
4-bedroom house, but I guess fundamentally what was different, I guess, was that my dad was a pastor. And my home was a very strict Christian one. And so I'm number 5 of 7.
Woo!
And I guess something that's only become, and I've probably never spoken about this in public actually, and I speak a lot about, I'm happy in terms of putting myself out there and who I am, my experiences, but something I've not spoken about before publicly, really, because it's only become apparent over COVID, is that I think being number 5 of 7, born in the 70s, but growing up in the 80s and the 90s, what I've established is that out of the 7 children, I think I've probably had independence forced on me the most. Wow. And that's not to say my mum and dad weren't there.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that my parents weren't in touch with my reality. My dad came to this country as a Garveyite, very into black, people and what they should do for themselves, and then became a pastor and served, and is still serving the community. So within that, I think my older siblings would have got more of my dad in his youth.
Okay.
But then he's an immigrant to England, so there's still that element of he's not indigenous to this country, and there's a lot of unknown. And I'm now coming up in a different generation to my older siblings, and they're not there to really affect what's happening for me and what I'm going through, because they don't actually really know what I'm going through.
That's odd though, because in a way, do you feel like in some ways you were the firstborn type thing?
Yeah, you could say that, because I didn't have my older brother, but one, he left home really before he should have.
Right.
And without talking his story, but essentially all the other siblings had more or less flown the nest, or just really out of touch with what was going on for me. So I didn't have, you could say I never really thought about that, but yeah, I didn't have anyone to really give me that guidance, because my dad's out of touch with what I'm going through. So although he's there, he's not in touch with what's happening for me.
Wow.
So whilst I'd never change anything, because I got a great moral compass from my mum and dad, and I think that's something I talk to parents about today. That's all, there's a lot of influences on our children today, regardless of the type of upbringing they get. Social media, the world in general, but I had a moral compass, so that has held me in good stead. But that doesn't mean that because of that lack of connection with my parents, and if we want to say with my father, because that's what the subject is today, it meant that I was open and accessible to other things. But I had in general though, like I said, my mum and dad are still there together, and I was in church on a Sunday. I've been in church more times than anyone listening to this podcast. Yeah. Don't try and check me. Trust me. I went church 3 times a week, possibly 4, because I would go twice on a Sunday, morning service, evening service. I'm going on a Wednesday, I'm going on a Friday night for young people. So I wouldn't change it. I honestly wouldn't change it.
What's the reality of your situation growing up? Because we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into believing that everybody had the same experiences. So it's like my grandparents came over as immigrants as well. And I know from looking at my granddad, there was not an emotional disconnect, but definitely a distancing, because there's a lot of things that I don't know about my granddad's history in terms of my mum's dad. That he just doesn't speak about life back home in Jamaica. And they've obviously come over here and just had to make life work in some way, shape or form. And to this day, my granddad's like, why you not get one job at the post office or Heathrow Airport or something like that? Because they look at that as stability. What was your reality growing up, knowing that the London that they came over to is completely different to the London that you're growing up in as a young man? What was your reality in that perspective?
I mean, I've come to the understanding that, we've got parents and grandparents, for some of us parents, but for others grandparents, who love the monarch, who love the people who actually, colonized our countries and enslaved us. And that's not a disrespect or a slur on of them, because why wouldn't they? These people offered them so much and promised them so much. And I think so, my reality is that I've grown up to grow quite disaffected from that kind of stuff, and understanding that my parents didn't have the understanding, knowledge, access to the education that I've had. And so when I see them even still to today have that type of, sometimes that kind of, I think we have to have an understanding of their reality.
They love the Queen,
Yeah.
They love the Queen.
They do. So I think, it's been an education, because you're growing up to be made to feel the same way. And it's just been an education. And sometimes it's interesting, because obviously I've grown up in a Christian, spiritual, and I'd like to refer to it more as a spiritual household, because I think to say Christian, and no disrespect to anyone who's listening, but it's not Catholic, it's not Church of England Christian, it's not white Jesus Christian. So for people who are listening thinking, whatever, I don't want to try and explain anything to people, but at the same time, it's different, and I've grown up different. And so when you question some of those other things, for me, I'm always wanting to be careful that I'm not going too far with what I'm questioning. Because whilst I don't sit here to present to be a born again Christian, I'd say that I don't sway from my upbringing. I believe in God. I believe that, there's one God, and that, you know, there's a heaven and there's a hell. So I don't want to sit here and go like I'm, you know, I'm questioning every single thing, and but it does make you. Well, I do question things because I accepted that as a child, but it does make me want to have a bit more understanding to what I was told to do, because I was indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And you do want to have a bit of understanding. So yeah, with that, it does make you look at things different, because it isn't just about getting a job and blah blah blah. I often talk about the fact that African people from African countries and African descent, their travel to this country was different to that of West Indians. The reason they came here was very different. You know, our parents, my dad, I did a project with my son for Black History, and it was established that my dad came here, he wanted to make £500 and go back home.
Wow.
Okay, and when he came here and he realised that it wasn't quite what it was cracked up to, he actually wrote to the Queen and he asked her would she send him back, and he got a letter back saying that he could go back, but she would not fund that they would not fund his travel back, because he wanted to make £500, go back to Jamaica and start a farm. So, you know, you look at things like that, and it's just it's a far cry from the world we're living in today. But again, it shows you the kahunas that our parents and grandparents had. I mean, no disrespect, but it's chalk and cheese. You look at the West Indies, whatever country it is, what are you coming to England for? No disrespect, but in terms of sun, sand, sea, food. But they came here, my dad came here as a British citizen with a passport, with English money, with English pounds in his hand. So it makes me, if anything, it makes me angry when you hear about Windrush and the fact that they wanted to send people back. Well, they came here. How can you send them back? They were British citizens when they came here. They didn't get citizenship when they came here. So it also puts me in a place of not knowing where I belong. I don't believe that I belong here, or I don't feel welcomed here, the place where I was born, and I don't feel welcomed necessarily in Jamaica neither, because I feel like if I go there, they'll refer to me as a foreigner, and I will be treated different there.
Wow.
You know, I couldn't go there, in all honesty, and feel like I could just go and live a normal life, because we know some of those stories.
I hear you. You've had the privilege of just seeing different eras. So, born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, where it's a lot of like the culture's a lot of soul, a lot of funk, roller skating and all that stuff. And then you've grown up in the 90s and stuff, you're seeing a lot of rap and hip hop and stuff. What was, in terms of from the point of view of someone growing up in Kensal Green, how would you describe the evolution of just what the area looked like from a culture standpoint?
Oh man, like to what it is even like to now?
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, I get really emotional when I go to Kensal Green. I get quite upset. I can't remember the year we left Kensal Green. My parents left Kensal Green. I left home before they left. But you know, I drive. I look at the home, the house we were bought, the house that I grew up in. My parents purchased it the year I was born. So that's my house. That's the only house I grew up in with my parents. And I feel that's Kensal Green was a cultured place. Yeah, and I go there now, and you have people looking at you like, "What are you doing around here?" Almost. You're like, "Why are you here?" And it's like, wow. And I kind of have regret, because I wish I would have purchased my parents' home. Yeah. I wish I would have purchased it. I made a big investment, without talking my business like too much. I made a big investment in the same year that my parents sold their home, so it wasn't possible for me to have done that. Not sure whether I could have done it. I could have made a better effort of it. Had I not done what I did that year. But it's the place has changed.
Touching on that before we continue further, I've always had this gripe of why, especially within the Caribbean family community, the parents or the grandparents leave Jamaica or Barbados, wherever they come from, come to England, and they grind, they work and they save, they get married, build a marriage, build a family together, they get the house, they get the mortgage. At some point the mortgage is paid off. Then you see it so often where the mortgage is paid off, the family grows up in that house, it's known as the family yard, and then one grandparent or one parent passes away, then the other one goes, then it's left with the family. Then the family's like, you know what, let's just set up and leave. Why do you feel like it's so hard for us to retain the family home within the family?
I think it's quite simple. I think that we don't culturally have that financial literacy.
Do you feel like that's a gripe on us in terms of our lack of passing on education internally within our community, or do you think it's external factors contributing to that?
I think it's a bit of both, but I think it's more external factors.
Right.
When you just look at our journey here,
Yeah.
you know, people will take issue with what I'm going to say,
Go.
but by and large, West Indian people did not come here the most educated and financially literate. Don't get me wrong, there were many people who were. And it might be prevalent to more certain countries than others, and I'm not going to name countries for fear of people feeling disrespected or upset, okay? But I think that, for example, let's look at Church Road. We've all heard and people referencing to the Somali community and how they've come to Church Road and taken over, so to speak, shops, etc. They have a culture of business in their community.
That's right.
They didn't come to England and decide they want to start doing business. They've been doing business prior to coming here. And so what was we doing? So, you know, we came here, we lived, which is great. We lived in houses together, done partners, got properties. But I think that sometimes there then becomes a bit of that lack of education of what you can do with a property that you already own. How the fact that you can draw money out of it and go and purchase another property, because I think that we have parents who, they don't want to owe money. They don't want to owe anyone no money. So it's like, whoa, I took long enough to pay this off. I ain't getting myself in any other debt. I don't need that stress at this time in my life. And then for them, you don't blame them, but then let's talk about the generation that it gets passed down to. It's like, well, boy, I've never really had money in my life. I've always kind of been back to the wall. It'd be nice to have a good 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 grand that I know I've just got in the bank. But actually, you know, we need to educate ourselves about generational wealth. And that's something that we don't really know about. So, you know, it's got to start. And we just have to start it. You know, we have to start it within our own homes. You know, there's a saying that if you're Jamaican, let dance at home before you dance abroad. So you just got to do it within your own family. We can't try to keep just saving the whole community and saying, yeah, we've got to teach everyone. Yeah, we can do that. But do you know what? Probably just deal with your internal people first. Then you can maybe start sharing that experience. But I think it is down to external factors as well. But, you know, again, our journey, we came here, our parents came here, they were hard workers. We're workers. And that's what we need to change, our attitude towards how we make money. For
real. So you've left home, the Kensal Green home. What was your journey at that point? What was you pursuing? What type of things did you involve in?
I never wanted to leave home. Okay. I always, as a young person, I've been an entrepreneur since the age of 14. And my plan was to just make money, stay home, make money, be able to just buy a house. Like, do you know what I mean? I wanted that from a really young age. I wanted to go into accountancy. It would never have suited me. I did start off actually studying accounts.
What?
Yeah. I can't see how I would ever be an accountant. It just wouldn't suit me. If anyone knows my personality. sorry for any accountants listening, but the talk is that you're boring. Right? I could, whether you're not boring or not, I don't believe I would have done that job. But I from a young age, equated that to money, just the managing of money and handling money. And that's what I wanted to do. But I had a child at the age of 18. But really, even before that, I was doing things that my parents didn't really know about, that really I shouldn't have been doing whilst living at home. And that was the biggest thing that actually I left home because of the activity that I was involved in, and I didn't want to bring
no shame to the door.
The front door.
What?
Like, I never brought police to my parents'
Talk
home.
about moral compass, bro.
Yeah, I never brought police to my parents' home, and I just figured that, listen, I wouldn't want that to happen.
So you'd rather leave.
So the biggest reason I left home was because what I was doing potentially, you know, could have brought some embarrassment and shame to my parents, which they never brought me up that way. So I left home. I had a child around the same time. So that was the biggest factor for me leaving home. And I remember I kind of actually still had a room there and stuff. And I remember my parents just like, you just leaving like that. But I also did have a child as well.
Yeah.
And made a go of it with my daughter's mum at the time.
How was that? Because I know from personal perspective, my mum's gonna kill me for putting that thing out there. But sorry, mum. But she had a kid at 19.
Yeah.
And
I had 2 by 19.
Woo!
For 2 different women.
Wow. So it's whilst you're avoiding bringing shame to the parents' door from a police standpoint, obviously growing up in a Christian household, it's like the whole idea of having kids out of wedlock and stuff.
Yeah.
How was that conversation? To say like, oh, mum, dad, like, I'm gonna you. Like,
Do you know what? Again, right? I mean, I could have been a dad at 15, and my parents knew of that.
right.
So I don't think that there was overly too much surprise on their part when it happened at 18.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously at 19, another, like, not the same person, and the person I had my child with at 18 was my school girlfriend, so she wasn't new to it. It wasn't a big surprise. It's difficult because I think I started off by talking about that independence.
Yeah.
I think because I was so independent, I had left home
Yeah.
as well. I wasn't bringing no drama to my parents. I was getting on with it. I was getting on with doing what I had to do to try and support my children and the mothers of my children. So there wasn't a whole... I don't know what my parents was going through, if I'm honest.
Okay.
In terms of at church,
how
they were dealing with that.
Yeah.
Pass that up.
Yeah.
Have 2 days ago, more than 19. I don't know, T. But my parents they're open books.
Yeah.
So they would have probably just said it how it was. But I didn't bring the drama to them.
You just left and got on with it.
I never brought the drama to them. I literally never have bought anything. So it's crazy because I was talking just 2 weeks ago to a bunch of men, and they were actually Christian. I went on a course. I was invited to speak to some fathers, and I didn't know it was actually going to be Christian men. They were all Christian.
Okay.
And I was talking about my upbringing, and I was telling them some of things that I was involved in. And I said, but let me tell you, I never brought no drama to my parents. None of this came to my parents. Like they didn't. I think my mum and dad know some of the stuff I may have been involved in now.
Okay.
But they know it after the fact. They never knew it
whilst it was happening.
No.
Wow.
No,
Wow.
They didn't. So yeah.
Wow. All right. So, what were some of the things you engaged in terms of your early years of entrepreneurship?
So I call it. Where do I go with this? Sensitively. So at school, I would sell pens, pencils, rubbers. I would acquire from other people massive chocolate bars and sell pieces of chocolate to people.
Same. Yep.
And things like that. And then I knew that there were people, youngsters in my school, or friends who smoked cannabis, and I didn't, or at the time. And I figured that I would just ask them, where are you getting it from? And just places I'd never heard of. And I figured that I could probably, there was people near where I lived, who I could probably get that from. Yeah. So yeah, I got involved in doing that. I remember spending £15.
What?
Making £5 profit, spending another £15, making another £5 profit, and then making £25, which means I had £25. I could get a bigger quantity, and I did that. I always worked. I left school and went straight to. My first job was working for Pizza Hut.
Oh, what?
That was my first job.
What, in the restaurant? Well, when the restaurants existed?
As
delivery, okay, all right, right.
And so I also then started selling designer clothing.
Okay.
So I used to use the bike to distribute pizzas.
Yes.
Everything else as well.
Yeah,
so I was selling designer clothing. I then got into computing and opened a shop, a computer repair shop, where I made and repaired computers. There's been things along the way that so that was kind of my yeah. There would be other things. There would have been other things in there as well.
So what's one of the first things that you put your hands to that you said, okay, like I'm proud to present this to the world and to
I
like,
think it would have been getting involved in IT, because I think when I got involved, my year at school was the first year who was able to take GCSE IT computer skill.
okay,
I picked it and never got it given to me.
right,
So I had a disdain for computers and IT. I turned my back on it, wanted nothing to do with it. And when I left home at 18 and started living with my friends, one of my friends had a computer. And look, for the youngsters listening, we're talking about dial-up modems that, like, 56K modems that take you ages just to get connected.
yeah.
And he used to have that in his room. I had no interest. And one of the most profound things that happened to me in my life, although I had 2 children by the age of 19, was a trip I took to Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh wow!
When I think I was 23 years old when that happened. And I had friends out there who were working in the IT industry, and they were doing jobs that were paying great, but they were able to also fund a standard of living in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was now working for the post office.
Okay.
And I came back to the UK and essentially never worked again for anyone. I came back and I called in sick. Never went back to work. I went back into work on my birthday, which was the 28th of December. Bearing in mind, I flew out in October for 2 weeks to Atlanta. So you're talking, I was off work for a good 2 months. When I coming back,
What?
Went in and I resigned. I remember saying to my boss, and he's passed away now, a gentleman by the name of Dave Cullen, proper East London gangster looking guy, loads of sovereigns. That I just think about Ray Winston with a big grey beard. That's exactly how he was. And I said, Dave, look, thanks, but no thanks. I'm better than this. No disrespect to you or anybody in here, but I know I can do better than this.
Wow.
And I remember being in Atlanta, Georgia, which was even more profound than things that my parents had told me. I think most of us have heard our parents say, you can do anything you want. You could be anything you want. But I never believed that until I was 23 years old, standing in Atlanta, Georgia, in America. I stayed in a motel that was black owned. I met a 36-year-old female sheriff. I met air pilots. I met business owners, and I saw black people who were successful.
Wow.
And I remember looking in the sky, watching the airplane just fly over, thinking, I can fly that plane.
Wow.
Like actually really believing that, yes, I don't have the skills, but I could fly that plane. If someone taught me that I got the capacity to learn,
You could do that.
I could do that. Like I really believed it. And I never went back to work. And I went into IT, and I think I became a certified Cisco network engineer. And I never used that qualification because when I got into the field, it was saturated. But that was the time in my life. Achieving that qualification made me knew that I could do anything.
Wow.
Like, it was the only limitations really was going to be probably money.
Yeah.
In a sense of, if I really wanted to become a pilot, well, I'd need money for that.
But the knowledge base was there.
That I could do anything. Like and I still believe that now.
Yeah.
That there isn't a job that I couldn't do if given the time and the the access, which is the biggest issue that we face for our young people.
It's access. Yeah. I remember we were speaking one time. Did you tell me that you was a DJ at one point?
I was a DJ.
Ooh, go on, tell me a bit about that. The hidden history, boy.
Oh, man.
One second, right. Courtney, take the key there. You sure? I go. Sorry.
So being a DJ. Well, what can I say? I had a friend and have a friend still called Peanut, DJ Peanut, or Peanut.
Large up.
He was known as Peanut, and rest in peace, Kamari Barnes.
Rest in peace, Kamari, man.
He was a friend of mine, and when I was a postman at the time, and he used to be on the radio, and I used to go up and listen to him, and I started to like, as a youngster, I used to like reggae, ragga, but I got into soul, started to like soul, started to buy like music, CDs, whatever. And I remember we used to just go up to the radio station while he was playing music, and he used to do a slice of soul, and I used to think, oh God, man, you just play the same tracks every week. Just play the same Mary J. like 7 days. Like, I'm like, come on, bro.
Yeah.
Man, do some other tunes.
Yeah.
And I would I decided to start.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so go on.
So I I decided that I would start bringing a few tracks in for him. So he played them. They started to get a bit of traction. People like, rewind, whatever. And then he started saying, yo, like, you know, introduce your tracks. And I'm like, no. What do you mean? I'm not a DJ. He's like introduce it. I'm like, nope. Don't even think about it. So then he started saying, well, we've got this anonymous guy in the studio who's been bringing us, who's got music, who's been selecting the tracks.
So he started to hot you up silently.
So, right. So he just called, because I wouldn't speak,
Yeah.
he called me the anonymous. Anonymous guy, which is how I then got my name.
Yeah.
DJ Anonymous.
Okay.
Right, that's where the name came from. Because what happened was I then started to actually just do a breakfast show, but with no talking, just playing music back to back.
Okay.
At that time, I liked music, and I was just playing CDs. Went on a trip to, I think it may have been that, well, would it have been that same trip to Atlanta? I don't know if it was that same trip, but I think it may well have been that trip, and I decided to buy a track on vinyl. I didn't have any 1210 or turntables or anything. I just decided to buy a track on vinyl because I loved this track. But here's the thing, like, this is, if you're going to play hip hop and stuff like that, well, you're going to need to play it on record, and you're going to need to be able to mix. So I bought this track and then came back to England and started buying vinyl. So I started buying vinyl. I had to buy turntables and a mixer. I used to play the drums in church. So nobody taught me how to mix because I had a natural understanding of beats and how beats work. So I started just mixing tracks at home, and then I started buying records, spent thousands of pounds on music, like thousands.
Do you still have the collection?
No. Don't say that. My collection is in bricks and mortar. When I fell out of love with DJing,
Yeah.
I had 2,000 records, and I was like, well, what am I gonna do? A lot of old guys have records sitting in their attics.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what use is that? If I want to give my records to my children, my boys are 18 and 15, like, I could play music on my watch. Like, I literally could play you a track on my watch now. You could go and DJ on something as small as this. What good is my records gonna be? And again, just take you back. I've grown up in a Christian home, bro. I didn't hear music playing in my house, so it wasn't really me. As good as people told me I was, and as much fun, and I'm sure babies that were made from the selections that I played, it wasn't me. And I fell out of love with it. As quick as I fell in love with it, I was getting bookings to play out, and I didn't really want to play out. I was booked, deposits paid to play out in clubs, and it's like, I've got to honour these bookings, but I don't want to be there. So it became hard. When I stopped enjoying it, it became hard. And I just made the decision that I was retiring, and I did. And I had the records sitting there, and someone decided they wanted to buy my records, and one person bought all my records for me in one go. And I invested that money. And I definitely do not regret that day.
Serious.
100%. I would not change anything. I'm happy for the experience I had. I loved it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change a thing. I'd sell those records again at the same rate. 100%.
I think one of the reasons why I probably gravitated towards just you and your energy very quickly on is because you had a lot of tendencies that reminded me of my dad. I remember early 2000s, and my dad started to phase out of the music production side of things. And one thing I always was confused about was, at the time anyway, because obviously I was young, but you see when a man stops and falls out of love with something, they just stop. It's like an abrupt, like, emergency stop
100%.
And forget everything. Because 1 minute I'm in Jetstar's studio every single week with him, and the next minute it's nothing. You don't want to hear about no tracks. You don't want to hear about no backing vocals, no mixer desk, nothing. And then it's football. So with you saying that, it brought me back to that time of when you're done, that you're just done. But it's not done to stop. It's on to the next thing.
And it's so hard. It's a great way that you've put it, because it's difficult to explain it. Like, because there's guys who, they will never sell their music, and I don't criticize them. I make no judgment of them. I totally get it, but it was something that I did, just like the IT work I did, the computer work. Like, you ask me about computers now, and I don't know nothing about it. You ask me about music now, I don't know nothing about it.
Wow.
I'm just out of touch.
Yeah.
You'd never believe that I was maybe one of those people that you came and raved to and listened to on the radio and stuff. And again, like, I don't know. I think my personality is such that you'll know me if you need to know me, regardless of me being DJ, blah blah.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't. It's not important to me, that stuff.
I remember when we was having the conversation originally, and you brought up the DJ side of your history, and you were saying how people only really started paying attention to your voice and what you had to say the moment that they realized you was a DJ. It's like there's this traction and popularity that people in our community just give to DJs and to producers and singers and stuff that you wouldn't give to your quote unquote average Joe. Yeah. How did you handle that sudden burst of like possibly attention and then just stopping it?
Do you know what? I don't think it wasn't sudden. It happened. It gradually happened. I think I managed it well, just because it wasn't something that, what's the word? It wasn't something that I craved. I've had friends, I've had girlfriends before I became a DJ.
Yeah.
You know, I've had women or girls being fond of me before I was a DJ, so it didn't mean much to me.
Okay.
But it did. I became uncomfortable with it. I remember vividly, like it was yesterday, that I came home one day, or my girlfriend came home. My daughter's mum. And she had accused me of being in a dance, dancing with some girl. And she was adamant because the hairdresser told her.
This was before Instagram, before Facebook.
Do you know the strangest thing? I just saw that, like, en route here, I just saw the hairdresser who...
Oh, serious?
Seriously. Literally. And I don't see this girl very regular. But I just happened to drive past her today. Anyway, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
One thing about when I was out partying as a DJ, whatever, it was two different people. It was two personalities, and I would treat it as such. So if I was out, I was like, I'm on good behavior. I'm standing up in the corner, blah blah blah, holding it down. And the person had obviously mixed up me and the person I was with,
right,
and said that I was, because the person I was with, he had a good time.
Yeah,
he had a good enough time for both of us. But it was things like that. People talking about you that don't know you. Your name's in people's mouths and they don't know you. I'd equate it to being a ghetto superstar. Not interested. Not interested.
Yeah.
So it was an easy decision, and something I don't regret at all. I don't regret being involved in it. I don't turn up my nose to people who are DJs or who are into that lifestyle. It's just, it wasn't for me. It was a stage in my life. I enjoyed it and I moved on from it.
Okay. So then thereafter, when we'll talk about the businesses that you've established, but when did you start to get a spark for just community development?
So that happened when, my first business, which was the computer business, which I ran with a friend of mine, Richard. We had a shop in Collierswood. We then had one in Church Lane in Kingsbury. But we established that we probably would make more money as a call-out service. So we closed the shop and made it a call-out type service. And in doing that, I had a lot more time on my hand. And just kind of I just started to reflect on guys that I'd grown up with. You know, some of these guys were still on road doing certain things. Some of them were dead. Some of them were in prison, long sentences. And I thought, you know what? I've got something to give back. I'm not successful in the sense of I'm not rich, but I felt like I've got something to pass on. How have I been able to navigate through Northwest London, Northwest 10, know some of the bigger characters, you know, so to speak, rub shoulders with them, even been involved in certain things, but I'm still here. I've got something to give back.
It's a purpose, yeah.
So I got involved. I remember telling my older brother, and he spoke to me about an organisation at the time who were called Boys to Men.
Yep.
And they were offering training and things like that. So I went and did some training with them. That's a whole separate story in itself. But that got me on the road. I started doing mentoring, and really quickly fell out of love with mentoring.
Oh, whoa!
Yeah, because what I realised from my perspective is that I felt that I was an overpaid babysitter.
Right.
I felt that I was affecting these young boys in their classes for the day, sometimes for the week. But ultimately, this would be undone depending on the type of households they were living in.
Yeah.
So I felt like it would be much more impactful if I could work with families and parents in some way, shape,
the whole infrastructure rather than just one. Yeah.
And then an opportunity presented itself to me, where I then started to work with fathers. And then I did some training on a parenting program called Strengthening Families, Strengthening Communities. And this training was designed over in California by a number of professionals, about 4 of them, so to speak. And Marilyn Steele was one of the people. She's now passed away, rest their soul. But she came over to deliver this training. And I was one of the few but many people that were blessed to have this woman, to have her come and train us. Because it doesn't work like that now. The people who made the program are not the people who deliver the training. So there's not a lot of people who've had that privilege. And this woman and the way she trained and this program, it was so impactful on me. Like, just even as a father and as a parent, I was being trained to train, to deliver to parents, but actually it had an effect on me and made me understand that community is important, like way more important than any individual person. Because I could be doing all the things I think are great within my house, but my children have to leave my house and they have to be part, and we are part of a wider community. And so I realized then that there needed to be much more done. And actually, that would be when I first really came into contact with your dad, rest his soul. That was because I remember he was one of the people I invited when I started an organization called Action in the Community. And I just invited who I felt were people that were influential in the community. And wanted them to be part of something. Didn't know what it really was going to be. So that was really it. I think that was the catalyst that, there's a way bigger picture than just me. I think also I was doing a bit of talk show on Unique Radio at the time. And I remember I had a big falling out. I was kind of kicked off, if I'm honest. I was kind of kicked off stroke left because I had made a comment on someone else's show that I felt that community radio stations were a load of rubbish and nonsense, because actually all community radio stations were doing was pumping music into the community, some of it not very positive, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I was frustrated that the station I was on was only allotting 1 hour for us to talk about the things that were affecting us as a community.
Brother, it's a valid point. I've got a major gripe here with the fact that we've come over here and we've innovated the sound system industry and the community radio industry and all that stuff, and for some reason it just hasn't evolved. It's the same thing now as it has been for so long. So you see in America you've got like radio stations like the Breakfast Club or Hot 97, and they whilst they're breaking records to make them hits, it's just as important for them to talk about like social issues and things to do with the community and stuff. We don't do that for whatever reason. But and even worse, we're not even breaking new tunes. We're playing the same songs over and over and over again.
This is it. The circuit I was on, I could go back now with all the records I was playing 20 years ago and still entertain.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So it is, it that was really frustrating that like we're not talking. Like, how can we grow? How can we grow? We're just playing music and just going to dances on the weekend. Like, really? So that was, that for me was like, well, we got to do something. So I think that was the
catalyst.
So
FatherFigure came first before AITC.
AITC.
Oh, AITC came first.
Yes. 100%.
All right. So talk to me a bit about AITC. That's Action in the Community.
So Action in the Community. There was a number of co-founders as well who were people who were invited along and stayed along and stayed together, and we started the Pride of Brent Awards, which your dad, the picture that most people see of your dad today is that picture that we took when we awarded him.
Bro, you were the only person and the only organization who gave him flowers whilst he was still alive. The only organ. Everybody else, they came with their talks about MBEs and renaming this award after him and renaming this event after him. You're the only person who gave him some type of flowers whilst he was alive. And that is something I will never, ever forget, because there's this one picture that people keep using of him smiling and stuff. Don't realize that was from the Pride of Brent Awards.
Yeah, exactly.
But bro, large up. So tell me a bit about the awards.
I mean, I think I got to big up Marcia. Marcia was one of the people who definitely had your dad's name in their mouth. Like, he deserves that. I mean, I haven't seen Marcia for years, if I'm honest. But yeah, shout out to Marcia, Louis. I think Ricky was involved at the time. There was a number of us that were Nikki, that were just involved in that, and the idea was to reward and award young black people within our community, but also look at a community award for someone who was doing something that we felt was special within our community. And it's a shame, because Brent Council, put it out there, have taken the name of the awards, the Pride of Brent Awards, and it's cool, because if I am ever to do that again, I will use the same name.
Easily.
We used it, we done it first. But I think that it was important. I think that a lot of the stuff that I've done has been ahead of its time. Yeah. It's been really unfortunate because, it was called the Pride of Brent. We used Brent's logo and we wanted Brent to endorse it and to fund it in some way. And unfortunately, they wouldn't. And unfortunately, we couldn't sustain it. We were raising money to put on the awards, and I think
it's important. Sorry to cut you, bro. It's important to emphasize that this weren't some dege community hall little projector thing. Like, it was full on production, tables and lighting and everything. It was the real deal, man.
Yeah, VTs. I mean, I know your dad. Man. VT for your dad, where we had interviewed people. Yeah. And people had commented on the awards. We were doing that. Years ago, and it was inspirational to the people who I think received the awards. So I think one of the awards was highest academic achievement. Yeah, we had young black kids from the area getting like 10, 12 A stars. Like, we don't hear these stories. Yeah. And even to this day, like, I mean, I think that would have been 13, 14 years ago. We were doing that.
Way before its time.
You can see that that's needed now. We only hear about young black youth when they're murdered, when they've murdered. We just don't get it, and like, we have to do it ourselves. I'm not in the space of. I mean, we can talk about why it's not done by others, but why aren't we doing it? Like, why aren't we doing it? No one's stopping us from doing it. So yeah, I think it was ahead of its time. It really was ahead of its time. I think an award ceremony like that, if it was around now, would be deemed excellent and innovative. Well, we did it 13 years ago. Yeah. You're probably gonna get a Netflix deal for them ideas there. Yeah. So what was the feeling that you got? Because the first Pride of Brent Awards was 2013. That was the one, right? Was it 2013? I'm trying to think now. Possibly. I'll yeah, something like that.
It was around that period in time anyway.
Yeah, I think it's around that.
And I remember going to the one that my dad got awarded, and I remember looking in the room and just being overwhelmed with just like the fact that we're here to talk about success. Yeah. It wasn't this like when somebody's died and we're here to talk about communities and what we should do and the things we're not doing. It was a group of people from the community celebrating the success of young people. How did you feel after the success of it and just how it became like an entity by itself?
I always felt quite emotional.
Yeah.
When the night was over, I would always find it difficult to say something at the end. I don't know that I ever really did. It was just quite emotional for me to just see people in a room being celebrated like that. Yeah. As you said, like, to give people their flowers whilst they're alive, I think is so important. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think for me, it just had I think even in the work that I do today, I mean, I never got paid for that work. Mm-hmm. That obviously, like, there was no wages to take. I never got anything back for the time that I put in. But even to the work that I do now, I tell people I get paid twice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I get paid financially, but I get paid with the ethics of like people's gratitudes and seeing lives changed from the work that I do. Like, you can't beat it. Like, I don't feel like I've done a day's work in the last 10, 15 years. Yeah. 10 years or so. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, I get paid twice, 100%. When you make changes for people that change their lives and change the direction of their life, you can't really put it's difficult. I don't know. And I don't know where that passion come from. Yeah. If I'm honest. I don't know I don't know. I just think maybe that's my calling. I was meant to do that.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. I think looking on just your journey over the past 12 to 13 years and your denial to stay stagnant, because then the Pride of Brent Award happens and stuff like that, and AITC is making a very strong impact within the community. And then 2011 comes and you're like, alright, cool, I'm going to do something on Father's Day. Like, already we have a negative stigma about fathers and Father's Day, and so a lot of kids just don't see their dads on Father's Day. A lot of dads who want to see their kids don't see their kids on Father's Day, but you decided to put on this event, which has now become annual and a staple for the local community on Father's Day. What was the catalyst for you to say, okay, I'm going to do this thing on Father's Day and it'll be the launch for this new venture that I'm starting on independently? Yeah,
it came from a bit of adversity. So I talked about starting working after doing the mentoring work. I then got into working for a charity.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did explain that, but I did. After Boys to Men and stuff, I started working for a charity. And I got the job through an unofficial interview with the head of Human Resources, who kind of shook her head looking at me on a piece of paper, said, I'm not actually interested in you on paper. I had IT background.
Right.
I'm listening to you speak and I'm quite inspired. I think you're going to run a project here one day. Long story short, I get given a job to do what's called father's work. And that was happening in children's centres, Sure Start centres at the time. And the idea of a Sure Start centre was to give children a sure start in life. What they found is that actually they were not able to really engage much fathers during this process, and they were understanding that research was showing that fathers are important to children and their development. So anyway, I get a job doing father's work and get made redundant within the project. It was £1 million project, in all honesty, in one of the London boroughs. The charity neglected to kind of invest any further, and it came to an end. The funding came to an end. They knew it was coming to an end. They didn't look for work elsewhere. They just let it peter out, which was really disappointing. Now, I spoke to you about being an entrepreneur, making money since the age of 14. So whilst I've always made money, I've always worked or studied, I'd never been in a position where I didn't know where my next
paycheck was coming from. And
this time I was. Yeah. I knew that in 4 weeks' time, I wouldn't have any more money coming into my account.
That's foreign to you, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely foreign to me. I remember I didn't even used to use a cash card. I just had cash. I'd always have a couple £100 in my pocket. I didn't know what that meant. So that was just strange. And mentally, and I was like, what? I'm not gonna have, what about my children, my family? So I had that, and then I was actually re-employed by the same charity on another project. As a family worker within about 2 to 3 weeks. I interviewed, got a job, but the horse was bolted. The horse was gone now. This was not, no.
You will never forget that feeling.
No, you can't have me in that place.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to do something with fathers. I had no idea. How could I replicate what I was actually doing? That I just didn't have any idea, but I came up with the name FatherFigure. I had someone do me a logo, big up Torian, who done that logo for me. And I had something, but I didn't know what it was. And then I started, I had some adversity with a young white female manager that I had, who was basically, I can look back now and say with full confidence and understanding that she was intimidated by who I was, which is not foreign for us as black men, for people to be intimidated. Although I don't feel like her intimidation was more on the whole he's aggressive side. It was more on my understanding of my job, my role, the way that I communicated with people, and my ability to do that. And so she made my life really difficult. And I think that's the one time in my life I've ever even been close to any form of depression type thing going on for me, because I'm a very strong character. Those things, I don't succumb to those. But it was crazy just to see what she was actually doing, and to actually have the papers and the evidence to know that someone's doing this to you, and you're thinking, why? So
Did it have a strong hold on you because at that point you were like subject to the chains of being an employee, so you couldn't really like move the way you wanted to move?
I don't know, because to be fair, it was different.
Yeah.
Because I was an employee before that, but
Yeah.
it was very different. The way I was working, the way I worked before was very more independent,
Yeah.
and now I was kind of like constant under someone. But I don't know. I was warned. To be fair, this person had that tendency. A lot of people had left because of her. So it wasn't new. It wasn't just me. It wasn't unique to myself. What was happening. So yeah, I think.
Sorry, bro. Do you want water? There's water there for you. Feeling it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's possible. Okay.
Nice one. Yeah. So I think that I decided that I would just do this. Obviously, I had that work had stopped, but I felt with my experience of what I was going, where I'd grown up, the people I'd grown up around, the lack of father figures I'd seen with my peers, some of my peers. I was like, no, this work needs to continue.
Yeah.
And I need to continue this work, because it's one thing saying you've got people doing this work, but not anyone can do this work with the people who it needs to be done with. So I was like, no, I need to do this work. This needs to continue. And so I decided to do this Father's Day event. And I remember my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, kind of saying, well, why are you doing this? Like, you're taking money to put on this thing. Where you like, what's this about? It's not, and it's not something you're gonna make money from.
Yeah.
And I was like, just look, I need to do it. I just feel like I need to do it. I want to do it. And that event had a couple, like just under 200 people, I think, 150, 100 to 200 people there. That was done at Poplar Grove. And it got some newspaper coverage. And to cut a long story short, I mean, I then get a call from someone called Julie Morris. Shout out to Julie Morris. Who was a children's centre manager at the time. She said she wanted to do a bit of joint up work with me because she had seen the interview, and I said I wanted to do something for Black History Month. We did something in Stonebridge in that the Faywood Centre.
Yeah.
And then some months later, I get a call from someone in Brent Council saying that they need some work done in the local authority. And 9 years later from that date, I still have a contract with Brent Council. And that's what grew from me just saying I wanted to
do one event.
Something.
Yeah. What? That's called following your intuition, and like understanding what your calling is, but walking in that calling though. Because that event itself has also led to a major pillar of support for fathers. But you also incorporated a football side of things by using what is the cornerstone, or one of the cornerstones in every Black community, of the barbershop. Where the hell did that idea come from to say I'm going to start?
It came from a conversation with someone else. I'm not going to profess to to be the whole, but I can't remember who it was I had the conversation with, if I'm honest, but it did come from a conversation with someone else. And I thought to myself, this is it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I grew it. I grew that what was said to me, because I realized that, look, I'm having this event, right, that I know is an inspiration to, but there's so many people who don't come to this event, all right? And it's like church. It's like preaching to the choir. The choir there every week, they're gonna rock up. They're gonna rock up. And one of the biggest bugbears in my work is that I don't get to hand over, pass on the knowledge and my experience to people until often something devastating or challenging, some traumatic situation has already occurred. And I'm like, well, how do I get guys to come to this event? It's the one thing, some people will value it, but how do you get people to come? And I thought, well, football. What happens in the barbershop? And that's, the whole barbershop element of it, making it barbers and fathers. Like, people talk about football in the barbers all the time. Men are in the barbers. Men have got children. So why not make it a competition between the barbers?
Yeah. Wicked.
And I mean, actually, originally I wanted it to be radio stations, and if I'm honest with you, it didn't get taken. And to be fair, I'm glad it wasn't about radio stations. I think it would have been a bit different. And I just felt that, look, I need something that gets your average guy to this event. And I couldn't make it purely, if I made it about alcohol and music, I knew I could get people there, but that doesn't quite mesh with children and families. So I had to come different. And I know that a lot of guys are into their football, guys go to the barber. So even if you're not really into your football, or you're not going to play the football, there's that banter within your barbershop. We're in this tournament.
And they take it serious.
Oh, man, you've seen it, bro.
They take it. I'm talking about the barbers as well. They take it serious, boy. When June comes, they're prepped and ready. Now that's become an entity by itself. You know, without a doubt, there's going to be your world of fathers and families attending the Father's Day event wherever you decide to host it. But touching on the subject of fathers now, you've become more or less the spokesperson and the specialist in this field, amongst a couple other organizations you also do work with fathers. But there's two perspectives I want to touch on to get your input in. The first being, where do black males go wrong from a father's standpoint? Because obviously, I'm not going to say the blame is totally on the male's perspective, because we know it's not. But based upon your experiences as a father and who you've worked with, where's some of the main catalysts of where we go wrong, and why the stereotype of the black household being fatherless being a thing? Where have we gone wrong?
So I'm not sure the stereotype is quite correct.
Yeah.
I think that there are way more fathers involved in their children's lives than would be perceived to believe. I mean, just look at the media. Name me a positive father that is black, male, strong black man that you see in the media. Or on TV. I don't see them. They just don't show them to us. But I'd be lying if I said that there were some issues. And I want to preface that by saying that, listen, because I've often heard the thing like, you know, from black women, black men are this, black men are that. And yes, in one sense, understand you are only qualified to talk about black men because you only date black men. But guess what? If you dated Polish men, Pakistani men, men from, you know, different cultures, you might find that there are a load of things that come with those men that you equally don't like and don't want. So we need to be very careful in that. But
that we're pigeonholing black men as in it's a black man issue.
Because there are issues. There are some issues that are universal for fathers and men. There are some issues that are more prevalent, from my experience, within different communities. Now, from my experience, what are one of the things that black men struggle with? I think my opinion is that black men struggle to maintain relationships, good enough relationships with their children after the breakdown of a relationship with their mothers. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that on a whole they don't, because there were many, as I said, there were a lot of men who do still have relationships, but it's the quality of
the relationship itself.
I call it good enough. Is it good enough? Because we can talk about good enough fathering. What is good enough for us here in the UK may not be good enough for a young black kid in Brazil or a young black kid in Jamaica. Because in Jamaica, in Brazil, for example, education is going to be your way out. Nothing other than, well, education's free here. Like, we don't see kids walking barefoot. We don't see kids going without food. So fundamentals are supplied for our children here in the Western world or in the UK. They're going to get the basics. So, you know, what's more important, your presence or your time?
It's interesting. I had a discussion with somebody the other day.
Your money or your time.
Your money or your time.
Presence and gifts.
Yeah.
What's more important, your money or your time?
I had this discussion with somebody the other day, and now I've been in the position for 2021 for about 7 years now of not having my dad physically here, and I sat down to myself. I was thinking, why? Like, I wonder why I haven't had, like, aside from like my brother, my granddad and stuff, but in terms of from a my dad's age group perspective, I wonder why like none of his brethrens have like offered the olive branch or offered to support in some way, shape or form. And I always sat back thinking, I wonder if some people look at a kid and say, okay, his dad's there and his mum's there, he or she is fine. Because you see them physically there, You just automatically come to the assumption that kid's fine. They don't need nothing else. But based upon what you're saying about being physically present may not like automatically translate to you spending time with people.
Absent fathers who live in the home.
They live in the home. Yeah. That's crazy.
And there's so many factors to that. Like, obviously, we know that socially now, like the pressures that we have on us to go and make money and earn money, it's a lot different. But then there's also some of it is like the traditional expectations and things that we have, because and this is why I choose to support fathers as opposed to just dig them out and find their faults, because the reality is that, well, what do you do? What do you do? Even if I'm to take the blueprint from my dad, I'm gonna fail. If I go with my dad, who's still married to my mum to this day, and has always been there for me, I'm still not gonna be a good enough father. My dad didn't help me with my education. He couldn't, but he didn't. So if I just go by his blueprint, which is the traditional one, which is what a lot of men think is to be the breadwinner, protector, disciplinarian, that's not enough today.
Yeah.
And if it's not enough, who's teaching, who's supporting men and fathers to actually know that that's not enough and that you need to do more?
Yeah.
Where'd you go for that?
Yeah.
And then we haven't even talked about the young man who hasn't got a father, full stop. Or the young man who's got a father who's not a great example. So
what would your advice be to someone who has had a sour breakup with the mother of their child and the usual implications that come with that stuff in terms of like custody and child benefits and all that stuff? Like, what would your advice be initially?
To know that you'll take L's.
Yeah.
And this is a concept I've come up with recently, having a conversation with someone really recently. You're going to take L's. You're going to take a lot of L's. Because I think that's another one of the problems that we have as men, is that we hear ego spoken about a lot. There's nothing wrong with having an ego. But what can be quite impactful is, in a negative way, is not understanding your ego and how it may stop you achieving things. And I think you need to understand that in that situation, you will not have the power and you're going to take L's. And the way I like to equate it, and I've come to this really recently, having finished a court case with one of my clients, and I've told him that it was a positive outcome. And he's left me a voice note 2 days later saying, I know you said it was positive. I'm a fighter, so I'm going to put it to you in fighting senses, in a way like a fighter. He said, I feel like I got the result because you told me I got the result, but I feel like I got knocked down 3 times during the fight and I've won on points. It doesn't feel like a win.
Yeah.
So you may take multiple L's in a year.
Yeah.
In a 12-month period, you may take 12 L's, but you got another 17 years. So I think that I would encourage guys that, look, it can be challenging. It doesn't always go your way. It might not be how you dreamt it, how you wanted it to be. You've got a child growing up in a household with another guy, maybe.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, I see men, because we can't be vulnerable and can't speak about that, it then becomes a mental health issue. It's no coincidence that male suicide is the highest.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't talk about it. If you talk about it to your brethren, you might get a masculine type approach.
It's because you've definitely utilized the lockdown stuff, and just again, you haven't remained stagnant. You've branded yourself, so you've allowed men to have a platform with the men talking. Zoom calls you do weekly. What's some of the reasons why you feel that men, we just don't talk? We just bottle up everything, and then it becomes a mental health issue, and it becomes a general health issue that affects your heart and all that stuff. Like, why don't we speak?
Because it's inbred in us, isn't it? Boys don't cry. We get on with it. Fall over, you brush it off, and you crack on. We don't cry. We don't complain. And we think we're fixers. So even like myself, one of my weakest points is like, if my wife's got a problem, instead of just, sometimes she doesn't want me to fix it. She just wants me to
listen.
Do you know what I mean? But we're fixers. We want to fix. And so when we get into a situation that we can't fix, God knows, what do you do?
Yeah.
So historically we haven't really spoken. I think that if we're two black men here. Well, the people that we might have in front of us that we are offered for us to talk to, they're not culturally competent. They don't understand us. They don't understand what we say and how we say it and why we say it. You know what I mean? For me to say blood clot or something like that, like they might want to start grabbing their handbag and running out the room, and I'm just, you know what I mean? I'm just venting a bit of frustration. So I think that there's a lot of reasons, but I think that rather than looking at those, I think we just have to understand that you brought it up. I didn't even remember that to start talking about that. Men talking. The acronym is men, mental, talking, and king. Men talking, and that was born out of COVID. And we've had multiple sessions, and some of the guys that have come on there have just spoken about it feeling like free therapy.
Yeah.
Just to have that space to express yourself.
And it's not like one-to-one, so it's not like guys are after like privacy or anything. It's a group forum.
Yeah.
And you're noticeably seeing that people, they just want to talk. They just want that platform where somebody will ask, is everything okay? And they just allow them to talk. Obviously, you guide it with topics and subjects and stuff, but you've got men actually talking.
But having that space, it's important, and the more people that can do that, the better. Because I'm just one person and one.
But it goes back to what you were saying before about access.
Yeah.
It's just giving them that access to that space. That's brilliant, bro. The second aspect I wanted to touch on is again from a relationship standpoint, but from a female standpoint. Where do mums go wrong? Because obviously, like I said, men, especially black men, take the blame and the hit so many times in regards to why they're not in their child's life, quote unquote. And we know a lot of the time it may not even be the male. It could be the mum holding the kid hostage. It could be them wanting money and not getting any, so you're not going to see the child until you pay X, Y, Z. Well, from your perspective, based upon your experiences again and your who you've worked with, where have mums gone wrong, and how can we improve on that?
I think overwhelmingly, I've been going to court and supporting men through court now for 7 or 8 years. And overwhelmingly, with the cases that I take on, what I should say is I don't just take on any case. And when in any case I do take on, the child is my client. Whether you're paying me or not, the child is my client. So that means if I have to have some challenging conversations with you, I will have those conversations. Okay. Overwhelmingly, what I can say with the cases that I've gone to court with is that the mother is not prioritizing the child. The mother is prioritizing her own needs, desires, and whatever that is, whether it's emotional or whatever, but they're not prioritizing their child. If you prioritize your child, you understand that they need to have a relationship with their father, independent of yours. Whether dad's a waste man or not. And he might be. He also might not be a good partner or a good enough partner, but he might be a good enough father. And I think that's what needs to be understood. Never would I ever condone or support a father having a relationship with his child if he's not going to do that in a way that is safe for both the child and the mother. Neither of them should be at any risk of any violence or abuse from a father. So with that out of the window and off the table, you've got. I don't understand why you would want to, apart from any things that are personal, things that you've been aggrieved with within the relationship. So he cheated on you with your best friend. Well, does that mean he shouldn't see his child? No. Was it awful what he done? Yeah, that's not good. I won't condone that. That's really bad. That ain't nice. And I can understand that it would be emotional too. But that should not stop a man seeing his child. If he doesn't give you money, should that stop it? No, because there are processes and things in place that should deal with the fact that if a man should be financially supporting his child, and you should go through those processes. I don't agree with men who don't financially support their children if they can, especially if they can. But equally, I just don't agree with a man being stopped seeing his child because his presence and time may be more important
than the money that he gives.
That he can give that child.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of the time it's just a child not being prioritized within that. And I don't want to pick on any one, because no two cases that I've had are the same, although they're all denial of access or contact. They're all very different. And I think that the sooner women understand that it's not about how good the man is for them, it's about whether or not he's a safe person for that child to be around. You picked him.
Yeah.
You picked him. The child didn't pick that father.
Yeah.
You picked that father.
Yeah.
And so you've got to live with that. And if he is a waste man, for want of better words, then the child has to work that out for themselves.
Yeah.
Because one day they'll come back, and one day they will work out. And I've seen it. Guys my age, your age, realizing that actually their fathers weren't quite what they thought. And actually things were made a lot harder than they even realized.
But they came to that realization themselves rather than through the stories and opinions of somebody else.
You'll work it out.
Yeah.
If your dad, if a man's gonna keep, and listen, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying that if a man constantly says he's coming to pick up a child and doesn't, that you must allow him to do that, because you've got to protect your child.
Of course.
So, again, we're talking about you've got to have the best
balance.
interest of your child. And unfortunately, because you don't like him, and because he cheated on you, and because he's got a new girlfriend, these are not reasons. He can't come to your house because I don't know who your girlfriend is. But you've just had 2 boyfriends in the last 3 years. I never knew who they were.
Yeah.
I never saw them. I never knew when they came and when they went. I don't know what you do on a daily. Now I've got a case at the moment where the mum's saying you've got to feed the children 3 times a day. They have to sleep in their own room, in the separate beds. She's like, and it's like, you don't own these children. They're not yours. You both had these children
together.
Like, what if I then start to put those demands on you as a mum?
Yeah.
And these are not because he doesn't feed his children. It's just because you want control. So I don't. For me, I don't take sides. I do take sides. I take the side of the child. So yeah, it's just to not pick on any one thing. It's where women are not prioritizing the children.
Yeah, and I think based upon what you're saying, the way to kind of get around those issues from a male's perspective and from a woman's perspective is to just communicate. But again, as you're saying, using the child as the common denominator here, it's not about me or my feelings for you or your feelings about me. It's about the kid, what's best for the kid.
And maybe to also, which I probably should have said already, which I think is not done in these situations, is that what they're not doing is they're not thinking about what is the potential impact on this child. So at a baby, you might not really see it, but what's the impact? Because all too often we see 12 and 13-year-old boys getting sent to their dads that has never really had any dealing with them, to all of a sudden be this disciplinary, setting him up for failure, because he's not going to be able to do that job now neither. It's a bit late. So listen, listen, what we do know, if we want to get what we do know is that children who don't have positive male role models in their life are likely to be more involved in drugs and alcohol, likely to be more early sexualized, likely to go to prison, form the relationships that they form will not be with the most positive people. Get involved in the criminal justice system. These are not a rule of thumb, but these are facts and stats and research which has been done over years and years. It's not even up for an argument. It's not even up for an argument. I wouldn't even have an argument or discussion with someone who thought they'd want to be able to argue that case with me. I wouldn't argue it. I'll just, let you go if you want to argue that. That's not the case. It's a fact. And if you want the best for your child, I think the way I say it to, I remember saying it many years ago when I first started doing my work, because I had a mother in a presentation I was doing, and she was like, my kids don't need a dad. I do everything. I'm great. And I said, okay, so if you were racing and, 2 people had the best sports cars, Ferraris, and you were racing on a track, you both had identical cars, identical skills, and you're both going to cross the line at the same time, but the object is to win. If the object is to win, and I said to you, I've got some Pirelli tyres, which give you 10% extra grip on the corners than the tyres, the Dunlop tyres that are on the other car, would you take the tyres? No, you want to win the race, right? because that's why you're racing to win. You're not racing to come second or draw. You want to win the race. That's to make that clear.
Yeah.
You want so would you take the tyres? So I'm like, well, that might be what a child's father is. That extra 10%.
The extra 10%. Yeah. Yeah.
No one's saying you're not doing a great job on your own.
Yeah.
But the way I was brought up, the way I check it, that's not how it was set up. It was set up to be
both
yin and yang, and that different elements that people bring to the table.
Yeah.
In that role. So yeah.
I hear you. I want to end on this. We've seen so many times where the occupation of the dad doesn't necessarily translate as well to his kids. So you see very, very many times where it's like, say for instance, a pastor, the stereotype of a pastor's kids, they've gone wayward. The worst. My dad was my football coach, and there was a time where I naturally rebelled against football just because that was my dad's thing. It's like, it's often that the household isn't catered to first in terms of the occupation of the dad. Because your occupation is fatherhood, obviously it's not a job to you, it's just what you do naturally. What are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way to make sure that that translates to your kids first before you can help anybody else?
It's a constant challenge. It is a constant challenge because I recognize that, like my dad, I'm really busy and can be serving everyone else. But it is about remaining, like, practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
If I'm telling you something, I have to be doing that in my house. It's ethics. I've got to be practicing those ethics. And that's how I try to do my work. And I think that's why I've been able to just do it so openly and widely as I do. But I think, it's just practicing what you preach and making sure that you know, I'm not saying to you, blah, 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 but then my son's out on road at 11 o'clock when I'm like, well, I don't think he should, but, you know, I'm saying, well, I don't think that's adequate.
Yeah.
So I think it is just about staying on it. I think it kind of comes more natural. I think I'm lucky, I'm blessed, not lucky, that, you know, my professional development has been able to help me to really, some of the things that I've naturally been given to us. Because I think that, look, by and large, if we talk about grandparents of a certain age and parents of a certain age, we've been handed the tools we need. We've just had it diluted by the society that we live in.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest problem that we've had is that, and when I say we, I'm talking about the parents who are of children who are falling really foul of things now, is that we want to give our children everything we didn't have. And I just think that's not right.
Yeah. There's
no value put on anything. I couldn't leave my house on a Saturday until I had done certain things. Straight up. You ask a kid nowadays what's a skirting board. They'll start looking on top of a wardrobe, in a cupboard.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, they don't even know where to look.
Yeah.
And we've taken those things out because it's like, oh, things were so hard for us. But when you don't put a value on something,
there's no teachable moment.
We 120, 150 pound shoes for our kids.
Yeah.
They go and play football in it, and then we want to shout when they come on with mud. Well, they didn't work for that 120 pound.
Yeah.
Can't blame the child.
Yeah.
There's no money. There's no value put on that. If they had to do some stuff to earn that 150 pound trainer, I don't think they'll go and kick ball in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I try to live by those same principles. Like, my kids have got to do some of those things. And you know, being a parent can be, it's like being a teenager. You can succumb to peer pressure of you know, what everyone else is doing, but you've got to do what's right. And it might mean that you are living in a minority space today.
Unpopular opinion. Yeah, I hear you.
So I'm not trying to be my kids' friends.
Yeah.
If me and my kids are friends, it's a bonus to them, not me. I've got friends already. And the discussions I have with my friends, I wouldn't find appropriate to have with my kids anyway. Yeah. So I'm not trying to be my kids' friends. My job is to prepare them for life. And for them to be successful in the world that we navigate. So that will mean that I'll do and say things that they won't like. But I think I got a little bit more experience than them. And I think that it's my job to pass that on.
Wicked. King, I just want to let you know I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your innovation, your passion for what you do, but your your selfless giving to the community, man, because it's definitely a rare commodity. You know, you're not in it for limelight. You're not in it to get plaudits or rewards or anything. You're genuinely in it for the betterment of people, and I really want to just to show that appreciation to you, because it's evident not just in the people that you've affected, but in your kids. I've seen it, man. I coach your son every week, and just his level of manners, how he conducts himself, but more so his striving to always want to do better and be better. That for me is a huge credit to you and his mum. So I was definitely going to give you those flowers whilst I've got you here, to show them my appreciation to you, bro, because your work is endless but so selfless and payless a lot of times, and thankless a lot of times as well. So I really want to show that appreciation to you, bro.
Thank you, bro. And I want to say, like, I know this obviously would have been a challenging subject for you, but your dad would be proud.
No, I appreciate that, bro.
I know he'd be proud that you've taken on the mantle and continue to fly the flag in the way that he'd want it flowed. So, yeah, I wish I'd have got, I mean, never mind me, you know, but I wish I'd have got more time to spend with him, because obviously I didn't have those years. Many years. And I think we would have done a load of stuff. But I'm sure, you know, you're here, so we can still do stuff.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Me, man.
No, my pleasure, bro. My pleasure. Where can anybody, any family, any dad or mother struggling, where can they find you? What's the details?
I'm getting too old to tell you social media guidelines, but I can give you my website.
Yeah, as simple as that, man.
The website is all the W's.
Yeah.
FatherFigure.org.uk.
Wicked. Well, make sure to put the links, and this is that YouTube stuff. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll put the description and the links below and all that. They'll all be there, innit? They'll all be there, wherever it is. They'll all be there. But yeah, this has been a great conversation, King. Thank you for coming on board again, man. Respect every time, man. Every time. Episode 4, AFC Wembley podcast. Thanks for joining us, guys, and yeah, we'll see you next week.